there, lovely listener. Welcome to the Confidence Connection podcast, your cozy corner for faith-powered confidence chats that are down to earth as your favorite pair of jeans. I'm Ashley Henriott, your go-to conversation partner for this fun, faith-filled journey. Now, we're not here for the holier-than-thou vibes, but to keep it real and relatable. Life's already a bit too serious, right? So why not sprinkle in some humor and some practical faith wisdom? I'm so excited that you chose to listen to the Confidence Connection podcast. Before we get into today's episode, don't forget to leave a rating, a review, subscribe to the podcast on YouTube and anywhere you listen so you never miss an episode and you get to hang out with your girl every Tuesday. I want to personally invite you to our inner circle, a gathering of bold women ready to bring Jesus into their businesses, their homes, and relationships. It's more than a community. It's a confidence revolution. Just swing by ashleyhenriott.com to grab your spot. So good. You guys, I'm here with my new friend, Courtney, who is killing it in everything that she does. I'm so excited when they asked me to have her on the Confidence Connection because she is all about sharing how to set boundaries. And we love boundaries here. We talk about it, everything. We believe boundaries are biblical and boundaries are beautiful. And so I'm really excited in the aspect of what she's going to talk about because she is really passionate about setting boundaries that disrupt patterns that continue to hurt us and overcoming family related challenges. And I'm so tickled to death to have her because we're coming into the holidays and we're going to have to be around those family members that probably have never heard the word boundary before. And so this is a really timely message as we gather as a family. And you know what? Courtney has a fresh message here. This isn't like a message that you hear continuously everywhere else. She's going to bring a really fresh perspective. She's going to talk to us about people pleasing, complaining, exhaustion, and today's norm. I'm like going to try to contain myself in this conversation because you guys, my community, know how passionate I am about these things. And Courtney, if I'm missing anything, just please interrupt me. But you learned as a child that remaining loyal to others meant keeping secrets, even if these secrets were keeping those that you cared about for most sick. And I read a little bit of your story about how you made the effort to sustain the peace, followed into your adulthood, and slowly how that left you depleted. And I resonated so much with aspect of figuring out how to truly love yourself and love others without minimizing who you are. And so Courtney's going to talk to us a little bit about that. God grant her the permission to continue to do what she's doing and show us how to do boundaries really well in the life that we live. Hi, Courtney.
Hi, thank you so much. What a great introduction. I'm like, wow, I'm feeling really good.
Yeah, you should. You should feel good. You've got a great message, and I'm so honored to have you here. Anything I missed, Courtney, tell us a little bit about what you do and who you are, and maybe
Gosh,
what's your message here? What do you want to talk to us about?
that is my primary. God really burdened me in the best way with this deep desire to just remind women that they are more than what their closest people expect or need them to be. I
Yeah,
found myself early on in that web of confusion that I think the enemy loves that's one of his tactics. And I don't think we talk about it enough. I grew up knowing of God. I grew up in a Catholic home. We went to church. I did CCD. I did Sunday school. I did confirm. I did all the things. And I didn't quite understand why what was happening inside our home wasn't really happening outside our home, but I was meant to honor these people because they were my family. And then this pattern of behavior came with me into adulthood. And so I believed early on that loving others meant losing myself, whatever the cost,
right.
whether that meant people pleasing, performing, being the first one there, being the last one to leave. I was the yes girl. You need me for this, I'll do it. And I was suffering. And I didn't quite understand. It wasn't until I was an undergrad in psychology. I got my undergrad in psychology, and
I saw that.
Yeah, I learned about patterns of behavior and why we do what we do. And I really became curious. I think most books come from a burden and a curiosity, like a good question. I said, why am I doing this? Why am I repeating this? Why am I saying I'm doing it because I love people? And yet this doesn't feel loving and people
No.
don't feel loved by me. And so I worked towards bridging that gap between kind of science and psychology and these coping skills and mechanisms and things like addiction and just
Yeah.
that's really what all of this is and
Right.
what God says about my relationships and my role.
Yeah.
And I began to discover that for myself. And it went against what the world was telling me, which, as we know, the world has a lot of misleading messages, especially for women. And so I began to challenge that.
Good.
And
Yeah.
that's really what the book is. It's a journey of challenging what the world says about who we're meant to
Yeah.
be in our relationships.
Yeah. And the book that she's talking about, which releases in December, right?
Mhm.
Loyal to a
12-12, yes.
fault. Okay. Yeah, loyal to a fault. And it's just how to establish those new healthy patterns, getting away from the toxic patterns. And such a time as this, right? Because I love
Mhm.
that you picked December also. That's pretty amazing because of your message and it's fresh, especially when December is very stressful. November, December, we're really pushing it up, aren't we? And so I saw you also have a master's in evangelism. And so, like, you have every single angle, and I believe God created all of it. Believe God created, in this right here, like, I'm big advocate on therapy. And so, the church, if you grew up in church and it sounds like you did, it's like they missed that message. And I don't know if that's from your experience, but I have learned in my own healing journey from my past traumas to understanding the physical human being aspect and what that is intricated together, what God meant to love body, mind, soul, everything that we have, how those are separate, but they're equally broken. And so how God heals us and the church is, oh, you have Jesus. So, hello, get your faith together. And that's like the pattern in which I grew up in. I learned, not grew up, but went to church. I'm from the hood, girl. But in that regard, like, how do you want to talk about that a little bit? And do you talk about that in the book about bringing that aspect in? I would love to hear your perspective on that.
Sure. Like, you mean the role that the church plays in that or played
Yeah.
in that for me? So, yeah, in the intro, it was very much I shared on we were checking these boxes and yet like this legalism of doing these things of repenting of my sins and praying to the rosary bead wasn't negating how we were treating each other. And I didn't really understand it until I was much older. And by the grace of God, I returned to the church. So I went through a season of just, I don't even remember God. I didn't talk to him. I didn't pray with him. I didn't read my Bible. There was a big span there where I just thought, I don't even think it was a conscious, this isn't for me, but I just was not paying it any attention. It didn't hold value to me. And it wasn't until I was engaged with my husband that I began returning to God in that relationship. Thankfully, now we're in a really great church that really does, value the family system, values marriage, really teaches from the Bible, teaches from scripture, but it's also modern enough to where you can apply it to what we are dealing with in our generation. And so for that, I'm grateful. But yeah, looking back, there was definitely some missing pieces. And I do think I share in the book that my parents did do the best that they could. They came from their own deprivation. And I think when we are deprived of certain things, like you said, mind, body, soul, if we're deprived in any of these areas, we will do things and become things that we weren't created to do or become.
Yeah.
And we begin to morph and
We think we're supposed to be who
fabricate.
God created us to be because we're not embracing that person yet because that person still lives in shame, right?
Oh, yeah. When you think of the shame and how powerful it can be in in how you perform or behave in your relationships. So when I was young and things were happening around me, I didn't have anybody telling me that those things were unhealthy or not right or sinful
Right.
in nature. And so because of that, I started turning inward and thinking that I was being too sensitive. I was over analyzing. I was being emotional. I
Yeah.
was the crazy one. So I learned a sense of I didn't trust myself. I didn't have discernment, and I began to fear loss of connection with people I cared about most. And I believe when we try to love others from a point of fear, we can't, because love is never a byproduct of fear. But I had no choice, or I thought at that time. I think children, when you grow up in dysfunctional homes, whether it's thrown into your lap or just by default, and you start caring for parents or being their therapist or referee or caring for siblings, and you lose your childhood, that catapults you into becoming somebody. You start carrying around armor and masks. You're like, okay, who do I need to be? And then here I am, newly married and newly pregnant, and I'm like, I don't even know up from down. I don't know what I want for lunch. I was so used to being what everybody else needed me to be, you know, bailing my brothers out of jail, like helping my parents through their marital affair, like that I couldn't tend to my own stuff. And that's when I began to unpack what God says about what is mine to carry and what's not.
I'm curious, did you ever deal with like resentment during that period of the molding? Like, I'm trying to love you, but at the same time, I resent you because it's not coming from what you're talking about, that love place, because it's very conditional. Let's think about it this
Totally.
way. Let's be real, right? It's very like what I was an eye opener for me when I work with clients as well and in my own journey was that it's selfish because we're also validating ourselves. We think that it's always for the other person, but it's actually, if you look at the root, it's for you.
It's
And then
so
when you don't
selfish.
get, yeah, we don't get that expectation, which you're going to talk to us about because you talk about it in your book about those realistic expectations in
Oh,
relationships. Do you want to touch
yes.
on that? Like you finish,
It's you've hit so many things. I'm like,
I told
yes,
you, girl.
yes.
I'm like, I got to
I
contain myself.
so resentment in the book I write about at its root is broken down into re-feeling. So when we are resentful, we're re-feeling something that didn't happen or did happen, and we're just ruminating in that. And as we know, if we're ruminating on something that didn't happen or did happen, then we're not paying attention to what's happening in front of us. We
Yeah.
can't be present, and we're being robbed of now. And so I
So
totally
good,
spent
girl. That's good.
we
Robbed of
are.
now. That's good.
We're robbed of the now, of what God wants to give us now, the
Mm,
goodness that he has now. And so I had to become, first of all, aware of it. And then, second of all, take personal responsibility for the part I was playing in keeping these dysfunctional relationships going. It's like I wanted people to change in my life, but I didn't want to change. I wanted people to get better, but I didn't want to get better. And so
mm.
I was resentful of people for not taking my advice or doing what I thought they needed to do in their life. But if you looked at my life, on the outside, it might have looked okay, but on the inside, I was crumbling. And I share about going through a season of addiction. I share about shingles outbreaks and panic attacks and losing sleep and having migraines and back pain. And my body was like, we can't do this anymore. I cannot house this for you anymore. And
Preach.
yeah, I was consumed by the needs and wants of everybody around me. It
Mm,
was drowning me. But here's the thing, and this is where I had to have that honest dialogue with myself and God, is like, here I am trying to love them, and I'm also trying to rescue them, but I'm telling myself I'm a believer. And it was like the Lord told me, if you believe that Jesus came to save and rescue, then you're not going to try to save or rescue anybody because you know that it doesn't compare. And
that's
I
the
was being a
boundary.
hypocrite on myself. Like, I'm not their Messiah. And God started telling me, like, hey, you want to love them? Let them handle their mess. Let them come to me. Let them deal with the pain of their choices. And I was
Yeah.
like, "Oh, but I don't want to because I don't know how to. It's so uncomfortable for me."
Mm,
And I had to get uncomfortable in that season. And it's still difficult, not as hard as it was, but there's still moments of I don't like that. I don't like feeling that. But it's been such good work because I don't believe we live in a broken world and our relationships will have some brokenness in them, but I don't believe that God sent Jesus for us to live in hell here. I really do believe that our relationships can reflect and honor him.
yeah.
I do. I think that's the point.
Yeah, a
And
million percent, girl. A million percent. So I was literally reading yesterday a verse, and it's like a verse we all know, girl. Like it's a verse we all know about praying, and everything you do, pray and petition and give it over to the Lord so he can guard our hearts. The peace of God can guard our hearts and minds. What does that mean? Hand it over in prayer and petition so we can be guarded, the boundary, not worry about it, not trying to rescue people, to what? To be in peace, God's peace. And Courtney, do you believe that because you talked about the world standards, and this is off subject, and you can be like, Ashley, let me finish this and then go back to that. Totally cool. We are transparent here. But just on that subject, do you believe when you were talking about the world's standards or definitions, the world has like a definition of peace that I see people chase? I've chased it. Let's be real. And then there's the God piece. And I think that
I
people,
do.
yeah, do you want to touch on that?
I think that
Or define that?
there's definitely two alternative combative things. So we know about the spirit and we know about the flesh. We know about righteousness and we know about wickedness. And they're constantly at war with one another.
Right.
And that's why each morning we have to be diligent. We have to put on the armor of God. We have to get in the word. We have to surround ourselves with not perfect people, but people that we're allowing to speak into our lives,
Right.
words of truth and wisdom. And that is our responsibility. And I do believe that we also have to monitor, especially in social media, television, radio. We have to monitor what we're allowing to pour into our lives. And so I do think that the messaging in the world is very much if you do X, you can receive X. Or if you do Y, you can get Y. For example, if you get married to the perfect guy, you're going to have peace. If you build that family, you're going to have peace. If you get that job, if you're going to write that book, guess what? You're going to be at peace. And
You and I
when we
both
don't
know
get
that's
it,
not true. You and I
girl,
both
like
know that. People look
not
at me
true.
and they think you made it.
Oh, you've got
No.
these followers and this
Mm.
podcast and you're doing all no. And I think that
It causes
when
more
we
war, right? Like
it does.
it costs you more to guard your heart more, right?
You have to yes, you have to know who you're working for. You have to know why you're working because the criticism is gonna come as
Oh
is the
yeah.
compliment, you know?
Preach.
And
Yeah.
it's like you're never gonna do it well enough or better enough, and so the peace that the world promises is fleeting. I've been reading in Ecclesiastes, King Solomon's talking about getting all the fame, all the discernment, all the wisdom,
Yeah.
all the riches, all the women, all the stuff, and guess what? Time is all you got, and it's fleeting, and riches are fleeting, and everything is so what are we doing today to make an impact for the kingdom? And I think that the world promises us those things like when you get all of these things you'll have that security and peace and we know that's only temporary. It's only our peace comes from our salvation in Jesus in grace each day that we get awarded in doing things. This is something that I challenge myself with is what am I doing behind closed doors that nobody can see? That only my character and the Lord can see. What am I doing? How am I speaking to myself? How am I speaking to my children? What's my character in my marriage? Am I God honoring in the four corners of my home?
So good. Girl, and that's where the peace is. And
That's where the peace is.
that's where you test whose approval you want.
And it's where you're humbled. This morning, I'll be honest, it's not pretty getting 4 kids under the age of 8 out the door for school. And there's moments where you can't see the Lord in me. You can't see the
Oh
light in
no,
me.
you see the
And
monster, monster
yes,
mom.
and I had to get on my knees and I had to ask my 8-year-old for forgiveness, and we prayed, and I had to say, "You know what? We're not doing this perfectly, but we're going to do it, and we're going to continue trying and working through some of this hard season that we're up against and just
Yeah.
being a family." And
Yeah.
so I don't think that peace is even found in proclaiming that you're a Christian and you're a
No,
faithful
girl. See,
family.
I love
It's
you.
not
We
even
should
in
host
that.
our own podcast. I'm telling you.
We could
So
go
in
on all
aligned,
day.
so aligned. It's alignment. Alignment.
Yeah, and so I think that's also a misnomer, is that you allow Jesus in your heart and you proclaim God and Christianity, and like the peace doesn't just fall onto you. Like it
Mm,
doesn't just, and so it's a journey.
yeah. And I love what you say that loving others doesn't have to hurt you. Can we like sit in that for a second?
That's
Because
where I
we live in a world where we have redefined sacrifice, but really what's behind sacrifice is insecurity. Do you want to talk about that?
totally. So I had this idea of being a martyr in my relationships, for my family, for my husband, even early on, and even with my first child. And I think that messaging came early in childhood, where secret keeping and really
Mm,
being the glue that held everything together. And when a relationship wasn't working in my adult life, I thought it was because I wasn't working enough.
gosh, that resonates with so many, Courtney. I know some
Like, it
people.
must be me. I'm falling short. I'm not doing enough to keep this momentum going. I also, can we talk about this for a minute? I also was unable to deal with somebody not liking me or being disappointed in me. And so I avoided that. Oh, if I thought a girlfriend was mad at me or a coworker, or if I thought I've been in school forever now, even if I thought like a professor didn't like my paper, I was like sweating constantly. And
Yeah.
it it was hurting me. And when I got back to the why of, okay, love God and love others. Okay, that's the great commandment. The first commandment. It's like the most important thing. And then make disciples. And so I'm like, well, and then we read in scripture that perfect love casts out fear. Then why am I so afraid? Oh, I'm manufacturing this love. I'm trying to source it from myself. I'm not going to his perfect love. I'm not asking his feedback on this. I'm not asking his tempo and pace on this.
Wow.
I'm just jumping in and doing. And going back to the world standards, we are in a world of hustle. And so if you're not responding to people and their emergencies and their needs, you're not being a good girlfriend. You're not being a good wife. You're not being a good mother. You're being selfish. You're being,
Oh,
and,
yeah.
and
Yeah.
listen, there is selfishness out there. There
We're
is
born
that, but
selfish.
totally. And in my book, I talk about rigidity and how boundaries aren't walls and how they're
Yeah,
meant
I
to
was going
bring
to
us
ask you
closer
about
to
that.
people.
Yeah.
Yeah,
That's a
it's,
big
I
word.
think,
Talk about that.
rigidity. So if you think
Rigidity.
of, yeah, like I have a scale in the book, and so it talks about porous. So if you think of a strainer, that water, it's very porous. Some people have porous boundaries. They like overshare, they're too intimate, they gossip, they are clingy, they just don't have any wisdom or discernment. They don't, it's just too much too soon. But then on the other end of the scale, there's rigidness. And so they're very guarded. And that was me. I
That
was
was me.
the help. Yeah, I was the helper, but I would never let you in, even though I was like the
We're the
most lonely
strong
person.
ones
Oh, yeah. I never had needs because I had learned they weren't
to
going to be met. So I
survive,
just,
girl.
yes.
Yeah.
And so that's the scale. And then in the middle somewhere is healthy. And I had to work to find that. And I still work to find that. And different relationships bring out different parts of me. So I think that we can be transparent and vulnerable without overdoing it. And I think that we can also be transparent and vulnerable without underdoing it and being closed off and cold hearted. And so
Yeah.
finding that and asking the Lord to lead us in that in our relationships is really the key.
Courtney, what I love is that you're making this so practical. Sorry, I put the two words together, tangible. Like this is very tangible to grasp for everyone. This isn't, what does that mean? What does that mean? How do I do that? And you're talking from both ends of the spectrum. Because like when I interview people, I always am like, let me challenge you to talk from the other aspect of you have the rescuer, but what if you're the one being rescued? And the person listening is, but this person is always trying to rescue me. Courtney, what do I do? What do I
Mm-hmm,
say?
mm-hmm,
Because they're both
mm-hmm,
trying to people please. They're
mm-hmm.
both trying to gain each other's approval. Do you want to talk about that? You're
Yes.
so good at
Well,
that.
I love that you touched on rescuing. So in the book, so again, I've bridged inside the book. I feel the Lord has helped me navigate both the science, psychology, the brain research, and also the biblical aspects of it. And early on in therapy, my therapist sat across from me at the little therapy couch, and he said, Courtney, here's this triangle. And there's the victim, the rescuer, and the persecutor. And at any time, it's the Cartman drama triangle,
Yeah, I know what
if
that
you want to
is.
look it up.
Yeah, it's good.
And so at any time, you're sliding around in these relationships, playing one of these roles. And the only way to stop is to just get off the crazy train, basically, and not engage in this rescuing when my brother needed rent because he's a drug addict and he's not working. I don't, God isn't calling me to step into that right now. Or I'm the persecutor when I'm blaming people around me and I'm being critical and judgmental of them taking from me, but I'm giving. Or the victim, oh, poor me, nobody helps me. There's no reciprocal behavior in this. And I'm always the one that does everything for everybody. And then the resentment starts and then the cycle starts. And so I think that we, again, have to have that honest dialogue. And throughout the book, I give practical, as you said, tips and resources and like journal prompts and questions on each chapter. And one of the first things in the book, I do a family of origin inventory because in order for us to establish new patterns, we have to look at the patterns we have. And so early on in your 0 to 7 is when your brain goes like
Right.
crazy, forming scripts, early conditioning, who I am in this world, who I am to you, how I engage and manage and navigate in my world. And so we unpack that together because, and it's not to cast blame, it's just to collect data and say, okay, what parts of this do I want to bring with me? And what parts is God asking me to leave behind? And how can I engage in practice? Because patterns are practiced. And it's going to feel weird at first to not be the rescuer or to not be the one that's critical and highly judgmental or to not be the one that feels like they're the victim all the time.
Yeah, like the
And
one that has it together. How do you ask for
the one
help?
that, yeah,
Yeah.
the becoming aware is really powerful to
Yeah.
then swapping these things out.
And I know you talk in your book when you go into that about strategies for self-care with boundaries, because you just said you're like, it's going to feel very uncomfortable. It's going to feel unnatural. And would you say that's when those self-care strategies should come in to be like, okay, how do I,
Totally.
do you want to
Totally.
talk about some of those? Is that okay?
So
Just a little bit.
totally.
Girl, I know you're loving today's episode. Before we jump back in, let's get real about something many of us face. Do those nagging self-doubts, imposter syndrome, the fear of rejection ever hold you back from being bold in your business, in your relationships, in the world, especially when you're aiming to align with your mission for Jesus? Well, here's the scoop. My Confidence Connection 2-day virtual workshop is your compass to navigate those challenges. We're rolling up our sleeves to tackle imposter syndrome head on, kick the fear of rejection to the curb, empower you boldly to align your business with your mission for Christ. And we're not stopping there. In this workshop, I'll equip you with practical strategies. Silence those confidence killers. You'll walk away with actionable steps to conquer self-doubt, slay imposter syndrome, confidently shine your light for Jesus in your business and ultimately in your life. And the exciting part, you could snag a bundle of confidence boosting goodies, like my confidence code quiz, my ebook, 5 Days to a More Confident You, a coffee on me, or a few, and a sweet discount code for our inner circle, and even more surprises. Don't wait another second. Visit ashleyhenriott.com workshop right now to secure your spot. Let's conquer those confidence killers and the challenges. Align your business with your mission and boldly shine your light for Jesus with practical strategies in hand. I'll even link it in the show notes for you. So don't forget to check that out.
Totally.
After this
Yeah,
episode.
yeah. So for me, some of the unhealthy strategies was a glass of wine, Netflix, social media. And by the way, none of that on its own is bad. It's
Bad,
when
but
we overconsume and we overdo.
yeah,
And so I had found that I was escaping myself. And one of my greatest distractions for coping was other people's problems. And so that's like the codependent's favorite thing. However, when I learned to establish healthy patterns, set boundaries, and no longer pick up what wasn't mine to manage, I had to then fill that void with good, God honoring things. And as you said, these are these quote unquote self care things. For me, that was surrounding myself with certain people that engaged in relationships in similar healthy ways. I wanted to have healthy relationships, but I was constantly around the people that loved drama, loved gossip, loved chaos, loved going out late. And so I'm like, okay, I have to go through a season of kind of being lonely for a while until God's going
yeah.
to send me some safe people that are like doing life how I am. It's not 20 people, it's two or
Me,
three.
2 or 3. I tell people you have one real good best friend you feel safe with. You guys can receive from each other. You guys are challenging each other, but when you're weak, you can go to each other. And you have that, just one, you are truly blessed.
And here's the thing, when you get healthier and when you no longer tolerate the gossip and the competing and comparing and the
Preach.
pulling women down, you're going to attract, not in this manifestation, new world thing, but you will attract and maintain and sustain good relationships.
Yeah.
Because when somebody is leveled up and they're living in God honoring ways, they're not going to tolerate your crap. So you've got to get better. And
You
so
want those friendships, you got to grow to get those.
you've
Are
got to
like
be that
a
friend.
friendship. Yeah.
You got
Yeah.
to be that friend. And then also, I know it's not affordable for everybody, but finding a Christian therapist is key. Even if you go once a month, just to have that soundboard, that professional person, obviously
And
plugging into a church that is teaching from the
yeah.
Bible and
And can you
small
talk
groups.
about
And
that, like the Christian therapists, because you have a degree in psychology. Please talk about that.
I do.
There's a difference. Would you agree there's a difference between a counselor and a therapist?
So I've had both, and I have found that as I've walked with the Lord, that some, not all, but if they don't have the same values and ethics and morals that we are being taught and clinging to and building our life on, according to the Bible, then there will be moments where it doesn't add up. And that's only, and now there's plenty of people out there that are therapists that don't say they're Christian therapists, but they are Christian. So those work. They are in the world, but not of the world. And so I think we have to be, when we are in moments of vulnerability and sadness and weakness, we have to be careful that we are not going to any type of authority. We think every doctor, every therapist, somebody that has a PhD on their name is the authority in our life.
Come on.
I have seen, especially with social media now, I have seen many
Oh,
viral therapists that are nothing but the messages of the world. And so we have to be careful that we are not being led to people in those dark, low moments that are going to not carry us out of it in the ways that I think the Lord needs us to be carried out.
That's why he says he judges them to a higher standard, because they have such influence that you're influencing people in such a, what I call, you're projecting. You're projecting some ignorance there, and you think it's right, and because it somehow made you feel good and probably the present moment that you're in, not necessarily walked through. Does that make
Mm-hmm.
sense? Where it's
Mm-hmm.
like now you're projecting, and these vulnerable people who are in those dark spots are like grasping onto it to only realize that there's real no life in there. There's not real transformation. And you and I both know that's only in Jesus Christ.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
There's aspects in tangibility. That's why you're here, Courtney. That's why God is using you, because you have a powerful, this is the fresh perspective.
Mm.
Honestly, gives me absolute goosebumps. This is the fresh perspective of, hey, Courtney, I need you to go in there and tell people what I actually mean by healing. I
Mm.
really need you to go in there and be a trailblazer. And I value and appreciate people like you, because it's hard. It's hard to just,
Well, and I think too, oh, you got me fired up. Thank you for those kind words, but you got me fired up on this like therapist counselor thing,
girl, I
because
know.
when people are vulnerable in a low spot, and I've been there, and we see a solution and we go to it and it doesn't solve what we think it will, and it gives us this band-aid, we then carry that shame of, I'm not doing this healing thing right. And that's because that therapist or that self-care routine or that crystal or that
Mm,
harvest festival or that
mm,
moon thing
mm.
isn't going to bring you that. And I'm like, that tarot card, that, I mean, what are we doing?
Come on.
So I believe in the power of the Holy Spirit to pursue people in their hearts. And I believe that there will be true moments of like evident and profound healing where people go, oh, this isn't working. This crystal, this evil eye, this therapist, this is not giving me, it gives me temporary relief because I feel like I'm on a path of healing, but it's not doing it because it can't.
They can't.
And I believe that the Lord opens people's minds and hearts and says, hey, you ready now? Come
I'm here. Yeah.
to the
And
living well,
and
you
he's
know?
so good like that. That's the
He
nature of,
never gives up.
that's why he came. He's, hi,
Mm,
I'm here. I really love you. That real love is what transforms us, when it's so unconditional and it meets us where we are. And this keeps coming back in my mind. And again, it's a little off topic, but not. But when you were talking about your 4 kids, right? I think of my mornings because, girl, I'm there in that season. Okay. So one of my boundaries in that is that when I find myself, and it's not perfect all the time, there is no execution all the time. Okay. But if I find myself getting irritated because I know I have something at this time and I need to get them out at the door and they need to eat this and they need to finish this and they need to eat this healthy thing or whatever that is, they need to wear this outfit, and I'm fighting with them for whatever reason, I have this boundary of sitting back and asking myself, does this actually matter? What
that's
really
good.
matters here, Ashley?
That's
Okay,
good.
you're late for a meeting, but your kids are going, like, it makes me want to cry, but your kids are going to school with peace. They're not going to
Hmm.
remember that their mother is screaming at them because you were 5 minutes late for a meeting. At the end of the day, that is where priority is, peace
Mm,
meets peace, where it's right there is, my kids need peace. Even if I'm late for a meeting, it doesn't matter.
mm,
That can be
mm-mm,
rescheduled. Their peace cannot. They will remember that. It will
mhm,
redefine them, the 0 to 7, right? We are defined, we are named, we are identified in our childhood, and it starts in our
mm,
home, which is what you were talking about from the very beginning. And
mm,
so, what is, we have to sit back at the end of the day. And when we find ourselves stressed or overwhelmed,
mm.
one of the things this morning was, I have an ADD, HD, where you're in the fridge. Oh, I need milk. Oh, no, that means I need coffee. Oh, no, that means I need to get a grocery list together and I need to do a pickup order. But what else do I need? Oh my gosh. And I felt myself like, and I'm like,
Yeah.
wait a second, pause. You don't
Mm,
really need coffee. You're good for a couple of days. It's just some milk. Grab some Starbucks. Okay.
mhm.
And get the milk. It's going to be okay. It's all right. This doesn't get to steal. And so
Amen.
those, I believe that there's so much in your book that is
Mm,
just going to help people in a real way. A
I
real
love
way.
that you're touching on this. I love that you're touching on it because the third part in the book is legacy writing. And I talk about how I did all this inner healing work with the Lord on my family of origin, on these new
Yeah.
patterns of behavior. And then I became a mom. And then I realized I sucked at everything. I was like, oh,
that reveals
I'm
everything
still
to us.
angry. I'm still resentful. I'm still like,
We have it
oh,
together when we aren't responsible for other people. And then,
this is really difficult. Like the most sanctifying work there
oh my
ever
gosh.
is. And I, in the book, talk about triggers and this trigger cycle. And so what I'm hearing you say is very similar to one of the examples in the book. There's this trigger. So it's like the coffee, the kid's outfit, the tantrum, the thing, not the control. That's
The
really what it is.
control.
But if we look underneath that, it always comes back to not feeling safe. And the not feeling safe now reminds us of not feeling safe as a kid. It's never
The
new.
abandonment.
It's never new. Nothing
Mm-mm.
is new. And if we look at our brain is constantly trying to connect the dots and make sense of something and cling to control to feel safe.
Yeah.
And so it's more than just the kid's uniform. It's, I want everybody to put together because then I feel like a good
Because,
mom.
and then I wasn't put together when I was a kid.
Totally. And I don't want to feel that way. I don't want them to feel, I don't want them to look stained and dirty because I was stained and dirty. And I want them to know that they are loved because I didn't feel that's not how they feel loved, but we formulate these things.
Because of our childhood. So we're projecting.
Totally.
And that's security. Like security, like we're like number one woman's needs is security. And we think that's just money. No, that's safety. That's
Yeah.
stability.
Safety and stability. And
Yeah.
that will look different kind of for everybody. But for me, like my biggest trigger when my kids would tantrum was I just need everybody to stop screaming because I grew up in a lot of violence and yelling. And so that triggered me into feeling unsafe because I was unsafe. But now I'm
Same.
a mom, I'm a grown woman. I live in a safe home. There is no violence.
You're not there
I actually
anymore.
I'm not there anymore.
Right. I
But my
tell
body
myself,
doesn't
hey,
know that.
your body does it because it's carrying that trauma. And so it's like your
Yes.
body's still there. And you're like, that's the
Yes.
wrestle. Girl.
Yes. And so I walk readers through, okay, here's a trigger, here's the response, but we have authority in Christ Jesus. We have authority over our feelings and our thoughts. We can hold these things captive. We can ask the Lord for what is true in them and what is not. And if I look around in my world today, not everything is controllable, but 9 times out of 10, I'm very safe. My kid tantruming, I can be safe in that. I can be the authority figure in that. I can allow my kids to see my emotions without them being manipulated by them.
And that's
You know
the
what I mean? Like,
legacy. That's the legacy you're talking
yes,
about. Yeah.
I can invite Jesus into our home. I can share with them that mommy is flawed, but they can still feel safe knowing that I'm not perfect, but that we do. I thought that this morning. I'm like, wow, it's okay that I'm screwing this up as long as they know Jesus. You know what I'm saying? Like,
Girl, I did
it's
too. I love you so
okay.
much.
I was like, oh my gosh, I am failing. Like this idea of you're not failing, mama. No, we are. And that's not a bad thing because we have Christ who never fails.
And that's
We
where we're
actually
taking them.
that's where we're all like, what a beautiful thing to know that I actually am failing, but he's hand chosen me. He's working good out in me. My family will not be like the one I was raised in, neither will yours.
Yeah.
And what a gift that is that we don't have to wear that shame anymore.
Amen.
And yeah.
Yeah. Courtney, we could talk all day. I want you to
Oh.
gather up all the things into one thing that you really want people to take away from here, and then tell us where they can get the book, where they can pre-order, where they can connect with you. And then I'm going to any gifts or freebies, resources like that they can get now while they wait for the book. I want you to share that one thing and then where everybody can connect with you. This will all be in the show notes. So make sure that when you leave the review, okay, you go look in the show notes. I hear it, Courtney. I love you. I had a very traumatic childhood as well. And this morning I was driving my daughter to school and I was praying for this. I just want to share this with you. This is so Jesus. I was praying for this interview and I was thinking about thinking it through and looking up all the things like to be intentional. And I was listening to my daughter like singing in the background, and the Lord brought me back to a moment and when I was a single mom of 2 children and I didn't know normalcy. I didn't know how to parent. I literally became a teacher to learn how to parent my children. I knew nothing. And one thing I did know, sorry, the one thing that I did know was that I don't know everything. I don't know how to parent these children. I'm still trying to figure out who I was then. But I knew to bring them to Jesus. I knew to keep them in church. I knew to show up in fellowship and worship and pray and speak words, biblical affirmations over my children every morning. And biblical affirmations, I knew those things. And I knew that if I created and led them to the foundation that really is more than me, more than I could ever do as their mother, that even in the mistakes and the not knowing, that they know where to go. They know where to go.
That's it. And I really believe that's all God calls us moms to do. You know what I mean? Is that just return to him. I was talking with a girlfriend this morning. She's in my cohort at school, and we were talking about repenting and this idea of forgiveness. And I said, I think this idea of repenting. So if you think of a penthouse, the highest point, the is to turn back to the highest point. And I think we apologize to God for messing up, not because we need to be saved. We've already been saved. Jesus has done that for us, but because he wants us to return back to him in the highest place. And he wants our heart to turn back to him. And so I think it is a spiritual discipline. And I think similarly, I think that when we mess up as moms, that if we can just show our children that we too are walking alongside them and returning back to him time and time again, what else is there? What else is there?
So good, Courtney. Thank you for coming on my podcast. What is that? What is the one thing, if you could sum it up?
Oh, what is the one thing to the woman listening? I pray throughout writing this book this last 5 years that she knows that God has more in store for her. And if there is a glimmer of, God, is this it? Am I just meant to be this for everybody? I would answer no. And I would just encourage her to check out the book, to begin praying with the Lord to reveal who she is as a wife, as a mother, as a daughter, as a friend, and to begin challenging what the world is asking of her.
Yeah.
And just know that anything that God asks us to put down, it's only because he has something better. And for that, we can be grateful.
Where can people get Loyal to a Fault?
Loyal to a Fault is still, I don't know when this episode's coming out, but it's still available for pre-order. They can go to my website, Courtney J. Berg, but they can go on Amazon, Target, Barnes & Noble, small bookstores. And if they pre-order, you had alluded to free bundles. We do. We actually have a free bundle right now. I created videos with scripts on how to just manage and navigate the holidays. As you had mentioned early in the episode, we're hanging out with family that we probably don't typically see. We're walking through a season of healing and trying to figure out these triggers and these boundaries. And that can be hard and overwhelming. And so I have videos on how to manage the expectations of others, or when Uncle Joe says something rude again at Christmas, like how do we actually reveal the love of Christ in that moment? How can we not overreact or underreact in those moments? And so I have videos and scripts for that. You also get the first 3 chapters of the book right away, and then some downloadable biblical like affirmations that for me, when I'm learning something new, I need to see it everywhere. So I put things on my fridge, I put things on my mirror, I put things on my steering wheel.
Yeah.
Because I need to know throughout my day. And so I just have some like biblical boundary related affirmations for the women out there that are like just trying to figure out who they are inside their relationship. So that's all available until 12/12 when the book publishes. Like it does not have to be. We do not have to go into it going, oh, that was terrible. I did it again to myself. We don't have to be resentful and angry at the people that we care about. We can honestly enjoy time with people. We just have to put in the effort and take some responsibility for how we're showing up.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. And find her on Instagram, all the socials. She's there. She's amazing, giving value after value.
Mm.
And Courtney, just a fun question before we close. Does anybody tell you like who you look like as a celebrity?
No,
I'm
tell away.
Really? You've never been? Okay. I don't watch the Kardashians, but it's everywhere. And you look like Kim Kardashian. Like the whole time I'm like, should I say that? I'm going to say it. It's okay. She knows me at this point.
Is it the leopard and the black bun?
I
and
looked at your other pictures though, and like I was like, she looks like a Kardashian. But then now here, I'm like, it's everything. Like if you go back
Wow.
and watch this or just look, like
Thank
you'll
you.
see it.
That's
Ask your
so funny.
husband and all the people.
I will ask my husband. I will ask my husband. That's hysterical. I've not heard that, but thank you. They are.
Really? Watch, everybody's going to say it now after this, like
I
the whole time.
think
You're
it's the leopard
gorgeous.
turtleneck.
Thank you, Courtney.
Thank you.
Another heart-to-heart episode of the Confidence Connection podcast. Remember, your connection with Christ isn't a lofty goal. It's your daily lifeline. If today's chat has you nodding in agreement, hallelujahs and amens along with it, or maybe even chuckling, show us some love. Subscribe and leave a review. It's like a virtual high five. It helps us keep these conversations as down to earth and as relatable as your morning coffee. And speaking of practical strategies, conquering confidence killers, consider joining us at our Confidence Connection workshop. We'll equip you with actionable steps to silence those confident crushing doubts, slay imposter syndrome, and confidently shine your light in your business. You're part of our incredible community now, and I'm here to uplift you and connect with you. Till our next aha moment together, stay real, stay faith-fueled, and always remember, your confidence in Christ is the practical guide to a joyful and purpose-filled life.